Hello, I'm Dr. Angie McCartney.
And I'm Ruth McCartney.
Welcome to TeaFlix,
where each episode's intimate conversation features a fascinating guest across the spectrum of Beatles world, pop culture, Grammy winners, the music industry, chefs, producers, music stars, actors, and more. So bottoms up and join us as they spill the tea on TeaFlix. Little live button, and it says we are live.
Oh, jolly good. Hello, folks. Welcome back for one of our monumental chats.
Happy Tuesday.
Yes, happy Tuesday to you all.
Ange was just reminding me of a Liverpool saying that when people say goodbye to each other, one is, I'll see you all of a sudden, and the other one is,
Ta-ra, Teresa, I'll see you Tuesday.
And if I don't see you through the week,
I'll see you through the window.
Absolutely. So without further ado, we are going to bring on today's very special guest. I was astonished, amazed, and thrilled when he said yes. And this gentleman is like one of the top, in my world, 3 consummate Beatles authors in the world. Just an amazing and a good guy all around too. Yeah. And a professor, and deals with students and teaches books and things like that. So the crowd goes wild for, ladies and gentlemen, live from the Jersey Shore, Kenneth Womack. Hi, Ken.
Good morning, Ken.
Hello, ladies. It's so lovely to see you.
Absolutely.
It's good afternoon for you, I think, isn't it?
It is. We are well into the afternoon here.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So great. Thanks for making time. I know you've got a lot going on today. So
He's got a lot going on every day, this man. I reckon he must be at least 100 years old with all those books he's written.
What, like you?
No, I'm only 93 and I'm just a mere child. I will be 94 in November.
That's right.
And guess who'll be 64 in
That's my
February?
next one.
Yeah.
That's a Beatles milestone if ever there were one.
And it just, and it's
Absolutely.
right around the time of a Beatle Fest too, isn't it?
It is in February. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Everybody's jumping on from all over the world.
Okay.
I see Don Stinson and Sammy from Atlanta. Martin's upstairs. So he does count, but not for long distance. We get people on from all over the world, and then we share this to our TeaFlix YouTube playlist on McCartney Studios. And so it literally goes, you'll be going global this afternoon once this is recorded.
Finally, world domination. I sure
Absolutely.
That opportunity could only happen with the two of you.
Yeah, we expect to see you dancing on TikTok next. Actually, I think the old farts have taken that over, haven't they?
They have, indeed.
Yeah,
so Joanne Grebs is just saying she's just finished The Last Days of John Lennon, and it was incredible. I concur, Joanne.
Oh, that's lovely of her.
So what leads you to, I mean, I know you've written outside of the Beatles, obviously, and we'll get into that shortly, but what gravitates you towards particular subjects within the realm of the Beatles? How do you get an idea, or how do you pick, like, for example, The Last Days of John Lennon? It's a finite piece of history.
Well, a couple of things usually revolve around 2 questions. And the question with John Lennon was, I wanted a book that did that. There wasn't really a book that isolated by telling us the story of that last year and what an incredible comeback story it was, because it tends to be shrouded, as we all know, in tragedy.
Yeah.
So I was looking for a way to sort of revivify that. And also living, perchance, as I do so close to the city, it's remarkable to me how different it is. And I'm sure you both have noticed this. I don't think John Lennon would recognize anything outside of the Dakota now, right? It's been
probably not. Yeah.
So drastically and dramatically. And I wanted to try to capture that flavor that existed back then. So that was sort of what I was interested in. As far as the Beatles in general, there's a question I don't know that any of us can ever adequately answer. And it's the one that I address in my Beatles classes here at Monmouth University. And that is, how were they able to make this artistic leap from, the ground zero of Love Me Do to Abbey Road? Yeah. Nobody does that. And I feel like I'm closer to the answer, but, they are an outlier. I don't know if we'll ever truly understand it, but that's what excites me.
Yes. And from one of my favorite Samuel L. Jackson films shot in Liverpool, the answer is probably drugs, Mr. McIlvaine. Well, that certainly did play a part in it. Not a great part, not one I partook in nor would recommend. But, nowadays you're seeing a lot of serious research into psilocybin and, guided PTSD things. I don't know enough about it to opine either way, but when you think they were at the forefront of everything, and I'm always amazed by all of us, the Beatle family, how, there are billions of years of human history, and we managed to luck out to be alive in the bit where we had, Picasso, Einstein, Timothy Leary, the Beatles, Muhammad Ali,
Ken Womack.
When you look at the stretch of human history, you think we got to be alive in this chunk. Isn't that amazing?
It is remarkable. And, we're also, I guess, fortunate to be alive with this kind of explosive technology, right? And I don't mean technology that explodes. I just mean ever changing. It's remarkable when you look back at our younger days and the rhythms of our lives 40 years ago. And then when you look at them now, when it's so very, very different, right? The rhythms have completely changed.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Well, and when you think about how long it took to get, information from one place to the other.
Absolutely.
You had pen pals in Brazil.
I did. I had a pen pal in Brazil, and I found her address in a newspaper looking for a pen pal, and we wrote to each other for years. I was about maybe 12 or 13, and I thought it was so exciting to get a letter with a postage stamp on it from Brazil.
And it would take weeks, wouldn't it? 6-8 weeks?
Yeah, yes.
More.
Yeah, and I had asthma badly in those days, and she sent me a bottle of something called Vapocresoline, and you had to burn it on a shovel full of hot coals. How lovely.
We're getting a tad off the track here.
I know, yeah.
No, but you can't make that up. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, it's instantaneous. The whole world knows when something happens.
If you burp or you pick your nose, the world knows within seconds.
It took a while for the sad news of John's assassination to travel around the world, but now we're all glued to watching this submarine hour by hour. Do they have enough oxygen? And I think that the great thing that people like you do, Ken, the service you give to humanity, is not just the research and the passion and the book writing, but you produce, and Angie does too, you produce a piece of media that makes people sit, whether they're reading it on a Kindle or on paper, and just lose their minds, go back in time and be part of another story and make a kind of a video in their heads of what it is that talented people like you describe. Mm-hmm. That's got to be gratifying, right?
Mm-hmm. I think that we know when this kind of work, when we're talking about nonfiction about great musicians such as the Beatles, Lennon, et cetera, we know it's working when, and I know it's working personally for me, when I happen to put down the book I'm reading and go find the songs to listen to.
Yes.
Begin to hear them in my head, because I think that's ultimately the subject that we serve, right? Is to bring music to life and the making of it. And, that's one of the really cool things about today's generation that I can't get enough of. And it's so exciting when we do the Beatles in class, or in the spring I do, pun intended, Springsteen, right? You have to on the Jersey Shore. It's part of the
Sure. It's the law, I would think.
Right. But what's wonderful about this is students today, our newest generation, is very interested in understanding how things work. And when you look back at the Beatles, and you know this intimately, they were problem solvers, right? They were trying to create certain sounds and replicate the visions in their heads, using existing technology, which is, of course, nothing like our own. And the students want to understand how that came about.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
How do you make those kinds of solutions? And of course, ultimately, I hope that they begin making their own art or solving their own problems and developing confidence in that way.
Right. I mean, and I think that's, the story Jeff Emmerich told us tragically before he passed. He came down to a studio where we were working with Nick Marischal, one of our artists, at East West on Sunset, and Jeff popped in for tea, and Nick Marischal ultimately hired him to remix and produce his version of Things We Said Today. And they were talking about all of this, and how John Lennon would say, well, I know we've only got 4 tracks, Jeff, but we're going down the pub and we want to record like 16 more when we get back. And so, the engineers at EMI, who used to go around in white coats because they were engineers, Jeff scratched his head and figured out what we would now just click a button and do bounce to disc, bounce the tracks one on top of the other. And with digital, you've got unlimited tracks. But it was people like Jeff Emmerich from the mind of a crazy John Lennon who just threw that, work it out. We can work it out, except we as you, and we're going to the pub.
And, I love that story because it reminds us that as wonderful as these folks were, and the fact that we're sitting here talking about them these many years later underscores that. Yeah. Everybody needs help. Nobody does it alone. And having somebody there like Jeff who can solve that problem, or George Martin, is absolutely essential.
Yes.
And it's what to me makes a lot of this very fascinating is trying to understand how they would go about that. And there's something mysterious too that needs to be explored. And I love doing it in class. So Jeff once said to me, in fact, it may have been the last thing he said to me. I said to him something like, well, why do they keep bringing you back in? And he laughed and he liked the joke. And he said, oh, I know why. He said, because I know how to make it sound like a record.
Yeah.
And I love that line, right? That's a great line because when I talk about it in class, it's such an interesting discussion point. Why do some recordings sound like they're homemade, junk that I could have made right here in my room and not like a record? What is it that gives it the veneer of professionalism?
Right.
In addition to the fact that he's making records with the Beatles and I'm, diddling around here in my room. So, I think that those are pretty interesting questions to explore too.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who are gifted with their ears. We were talking about this last night. Ahmet Ertegun, amazing ears. Clive David, still to this day, great ears. Doesn't make them engineers, but they know what the song is. Because there's so many components, aren't there? You have to have a good song to start with, right? And you have to have an appealing lyric that makes people think that they could be part of that picture. And then once you get the good song, that's not enough. Then you have to have somebody who can make it sound like a record, a Jeff or a George or a Giles Martin. And, it's always the band or the superstar, the Springsteen, that sort of gets all the glory, but it truly does take a village.
Sure. And how do you get that music, especially today, I find this beguiling. How do you get that into the hands of the folks who would like a song like that, right?
Yeah.
I know that right now out there are songs that the three of us would just adore, but they're not snaking their way towards us. How do we get those songs to find their way towards us? I mean, everybody who's selling insurance and concert tickets knows how to find me. I want to know how those songs can find me too.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. We're working with another young, incredible artist called Nick Black out of Memphis. And that is the issue, is like Spotify is so oversubscribed. People rent their music and Spotify pays 1/3 of 1 penny per stream to the artists. And it's the noise, right? It's this huge shopping mall of songs. How do you discover new music? In fact, another one of our friends, Barry Coffing, has launched We Get Music, which is a music discovery platform. Oh. And I think there's time for that. In the old days, though, with the Beatles, it was the power of the DJ. And, if you got on the local radio and then you were lucky enough to get on BBC, kids would go into NEMS or record stores and ask for it. But there's just there's so much more of it now that it's difficult.
Traffic, I agree. The traffic makes a difference. It's I guess in a way we've always been stymied by this problem. We just didn't know it before, right? Mm-hmm. So I would feel like when I went in, the same issue occurs with books. I would go into my neighborhood Barnes and Noble or whatever, look at the book table. Some cover would attract my attention, flip through a few pages. This looks like it's worth reading.
Right.
But again, that was dependent on not a DJ, but somebody at the store, a buyer making a decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we at McCartney Multimedia, we do music marketing, and there's just so many avenues that you have to go down now, with everything being sort of everything everywhere all at once.
That's right. I'll tell you what I was wondering, Ken, how did you first become interested in the Beatles or become aware of them? What sort of age were you?
I was a lot older than I want to admit. I was 11. So I lost 11 years of enjoyment just like that. And actually, I was quite angry with them when I discovered them because they had preempted my favorite show in 1977, which was the New Zoo Review.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know the News and Review. It's wonderful.
I've heard
Henrietta Hippo and Freddie the Frog. I love that show. And it was, even though I was probably a little old for it at the time, it was my obsessive compulsive breakfast show, right?
Yeah.
So it was on when I was having my King Vitamin or my Cheerios or whatever. And one day it had been canceled. And of course, who would have known in 1977, right? There was no entertainment column, at least in my neck of the woods, that was going to announce that the News and Review has been canceled. It's not really a piece of news. Anyway, the local television station, I guess, had to slot something in there, and it was the Beatles cartoons.
Oh.
And what was fun about it, for me at least, was I immediately recognized that the cartoons weren't any good. This isn't Yellow Submarine stuff. This is weak storylines, not even their voices, but the songs.
Yep.
Yep.
And the first one I think may have been Help. That thing, if that can't catch your ear, you don't like music. So.
Yeah, and you probably couldn't have imagined in your wildest dreams you'd still be writing about them or be talking about them today.
Not a clue, although my parents caused this because they believe that anything you're interested in, you should learn more about and study. So within days, my father had hauled off to the Houston Public Library and brought home all the Beatles books, which were only a stack about this high.
Yeah.
And so I could.
You need 3 U-Haul trucks nowadays.
Yeah, that's right. So it was quickly I could master that amount of material, and that's what started me becoming curious. And I was in orchestra and at the time, so I was naturally interested in music anyway, and that's what created this synergy for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, were you already knowing that you were veering towards being a writer, or was that was the Beatles books part and parcel of your writer awakening?
Oh, no, I'd always wanted to tell stories. And as well as anyone, right? When you're writing anything, whether it's a textbook or an exciting book about John Lennon or what have you, when you're in that world, that's a wonderful place to be. So, or when you're writing fiction, I've written several novels. When you're in those places, it's just amazing. You're driven by something.
Right.
And in fact, the folks who I think get into the most trouble in life are the ones who don't have anything, right? They're not driven.
Yes, that's true.
So,
no dream. Yeah. How, in the words of John Lennon, if you got no dream, how do you sleep?
Yeah. And so being able to be in those other worlds is what excites me too. I like the one I'm in just fine.
Yeah.
But there's nothing like when you're working on a book and you're trying to make that universe come to life and feel most real for people.
Does it spill over into your dreams? I dream a lot about what I'm writing about.
Oh, absolutely. And you begin to identify with the characters, right? So wherever they are, you're there too.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's, I'm finishing up my Mal Evans book right now. And I'm exactly, the Beatles have just broken up. So I'm with Mal trying to figure out what's next.
Wow.
He doesn't want to leave the ecosystem. So how does he stay inside of it? And of course he solves that. But
yeah, very interesting. Mal used to come with Lil and the kids when I was a kid growing up at Rembrandt.
Gary.
They used to they would come and visit Jimmy Mack, and I think you mentioned on one of our calls there was a certain kindred spirit. Mal looked up to my dad, didn't he?
Oh, he loved Jim Mack, and he loved spending time with your family, and of course Mal loved people ultimately.
That's right.
And just naturally gravitated toward those situations. But
right.
He saw Jim Mack as somebody really special. And of course, we spend a lot of time in my Beatles classes talking about Jim Mack, because after all, he brings the dance hall into their world. He brings so many different kinds of genres into their world that they never would have visited, I wouldn't imagine.
That's
mean, along with George Martin, he's just about as influential as anyone gets. I suppose Elvis would have to be next. But
I'm gonna
be George Martin on top of Elvis, frankly.
Well, I'm going to be pushy now, and if you ever need to zoom us into your Jimmy Mack class, we'd be more than happy to do so.
Oh well, that's pushiness that I'll accept.
Okay.
Okay, great.
You heard it here first. We're making news.
Have you ever seen a film called Ethel and Ernest, a cartoon film?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll send you the details when we come off air. It's
It's a graphic
animated.
novel.
Yeah.
Name it. Oh gosh, the writer's really famous. They play it at Christmas Day on the BBC in England every year, and it's a graphic novel. And the director and the writer were huge fans of Paul. They scrambled a meeting at MPL and said, we'd like to use Walking in the Park with Eloise because it's set in the 1930s. And would you agree to let us, how do we get the licensing and how do we afford it? So Paul made them an offer they couldn't refuse and said, by the way, because of my dad's musical influence, I wouldn't mind writing the end title theme, which he did.
In the blink of an eye, it was called.
It's called In the Blink of an Eye. And so it's the only movie that I'm aware of that a father and son and then the son have two songs in the same movie.
I know Walking in the Park with Eloise, of course, and that's
I'll write you after this and tell you more about it. Yeah.
Yeah, Paul rang. He was in Nashville, right?
Yeah.
Remember the phone rang at dark 30? Yeah. I don't remember what time it was.
And he was with Chet Atkins and Floyd Kramer in a studio in Nashville. And he said, get my dad on the phone. So I helped Jim over because his arthritis was really bad by this time. So Jim spoke to Paul, and Paul said, do you remember that song that you used to play when I was a kid? Da, 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 da. Jim said, yeah. So he said, well, I can't remember the middle eight. So Jim played it. And
we were holding the phone over the piano.
Phone over the keyboard. And he taped it from there, and it became Walking in the Park with Eloise.
By the Country Hams.
The Country Hams, they called themselves. And of course, Jim was a great follower of Floyd Kramer. He loved his music.
Yeah.
And so it all came together. And eventually Paul came up to the house with a publishing contract for his dad to sign.
Yeah.
Jim was so proud of that. Actually, I've still got it in my safety box at the bank with my few little treasures.
Yeah.
He was so thrilled to be a published writer.
Yeah.
And, I still get a little royalty check now and again for that.
Yep.
Because I think Paul must play it when he's out on tour.
I think, in some countries and some places that know the song, when Paul does live gigs, it's part of the arena, the pre-play when you're coming in and getting settled down before the band takes the stage. That is on the playlist because we see, like 16 cents from Brazil or $1.26 from Argentina or what have you on the statement. It's quite funny that this little song that was sort of a ragtime piano thing for my dad, went around the world, and it's still getting played in places. But do look up, and listeners and viewers as well, look up Ethel and Ernest. It's a really charming story about an only son of two very ordinary people who are caught in the World War II, the Blitz in London, and they move out to the country. And it's a really kind of everyman. It's nothing startling in the story, but it's really heartfelt.
It's a little slice of life.
There's a scene in it where Ernest finally plucks up the courage to ask Ethel, the maid, out, and she asks her employer if she can have the evening off. And off they go to the movie theater, to a dance
hall.
To a dance hall. And if you look very quickly on the right-hand side as they walk in, these two cartoon characters, it just says, tonight, Jim Mack's Jazz Band. There's a little poster on the side, it's like, yay, Jimmy Mack. And I made myself cry. I wore his camel overcoat to the premiere in Palm Springs, and I still have the ticket stubs in the pocket. So,
that's beautiful.
Yeah,
and of course that Nashville trip is gone. That's the famous trip, right? When Wings recorded Sally G, and we have the line. Yeah. I don't know what the G stood for, but I know it wasn't good.
Hair on a G string, maybe. Who knows?
Maybe Sally G string.
I don't know. It's in the Bible Belt. I don't think they had G strings.
Keep the party clean now, kids.
That's right.
I did. I usually do.
Oh dear, oh dear. So when can we expect? I know you gave a talk last week, didn't you, in New York about the Mal Evans book and all of your other good stuff. How long are you going to work on it? What's a publishing date? When can we expect that?
14th of November, my birthday.
That's right. It comes out on November 14th.
That's
Well,
right.
I knew that, but I was asking for the audience. Not for the interview, you know.
She was setting it up. Yeah, it was. Anyway, yeah, November 14th. Very excited. Gary Evans is going to come over to the States. And
Oh, bless him.
Great.
How old is Gary now?
Gary is 62.
No.
Well, yeah, I'm
He'll
63.
be 62 in October. Yeah.
Oh, I was thinking he'd be about 18.
No, Gary's
nothing
even.
wrong with my brain cells.
No,
Gary, in fact, is retired. So
she still thinks old policemen look young. So
Yeah.
that's when
Well,
you.
they do when you get to my age. Yeah.
Well, somebody said the other day, you know you're old when you've got 2 pillboxes for every day of the week. Old policemen look like they don't shave yet. And when you book an Airbnb vacation, you take your favorite spatula with you.
Yeah. What was the other thing?
That's wild.
Yeah, an old Phyllis Diller joke. She used to say, "You know, you're getting old when your liver spots show through your gloves."
Yeah.
And I met Phyllis at a neighborhood party one time, and I told her this, and she said, "Oh God, I'd forgotten that. I'm going to resurrect it and say it, start using it again."
Yep.
Yeah.
So 14th of November. I wonder what Angie's getting for her birthday.
Oh.
and you both will get as many copies as you like. And it's 2 books, by the way. The first book comes out in November, and that's the biography.
Yes.
And then volume 2 will come out a year later, and that will be everything so that people can go and research their own Mal's stories, right?
How wonderful.
That's right. They can go and read Mal's diaries and leaf through his notebooks and go down their own Beatle rabbit holes. So
Fantastic.
it'll be kind of DIY.
Wow. Well, again, offline, if you need us to create a website for that links. We've been using QR codes in her books for about 10 years now. And not until the pandemic did anybody know what a QR code was, because we all had to scan them to get our food, remember?
That's right.
Right? So we have something called Smart Book Technology. And so maybe that might be a fun thing to do, is to create a slideshow out of some of these things, put a QR code in, and then drive people to a destination on the web, so that we did it in her book, so that grandparents and grandkids can have the same experience reading a book, but one is digital on their phone, on the kid's phone, and one is in grandpa's lap, right? So it's that cross-generational thing. Hey, Granddad, who were the Beatles? Who was Ed Sullivan? Well, while Granddad's reading the chapter, here, kids, scan this, and then they can watch the video. Or
right? I mean, it would allow Granddad to put his phone, because he's got a smartphone now.
Yeah.
Click on the image, right, or aim the camera at the image and bring some new content to life to supplement the book, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that's what we've got in working in all of her books. I would be happy to, have a conversation with you and help you out with any of that stuff you need. Yeah.
Well, I am all ears, and in this case, eyes.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, no, good.
That's exciting.
I just think it's, not just intergenerational, but you can actually change the destination of the QR code after the fact. So if you update the content, you can point it to a different place. It's a book that never sort of goes, quote, out of print or out of date or out of style, because through the QRs, you can keep people apprised online, and that way you build a fan club, you build a community, and you just, you build on this thing called the Beatle family that Frida Kelly, Aunt Frida, and Angie used to put in shoe boxes and cards. And this is how I earned my pocket money when I was a kid. All the Beatle mail would come to the house, and Angie would, organize it, the secretary that you are.
Yeah. I got a pile of shoe boxes from a local shoe store and put them all down this long dining room table that we had, and on the floor, and on the windowsills, and on top of the piano. And they were each marked with a country. So Australia went on the floor because that was down under. And the Far East went on the windowsill, which went
East.
So did you and Jim keep up with that incredible amount of correspondence?
Yeah. Well, not so much Jim. Jim would supervise. He'll say, "I'll make the tea. You get on with it."
Yeah. That was how I literally learned the value of a fan or a customer, as John used to refer to them. And then Ange would organize it. My job was at 7, 8, 9 years old, was to open all the envelopes, cut the stamps off. I had a great stamp collection, and then staple the envelopes.
No, paperclip.
Or paperclip.
We didn't have a stapler.
The envelope to the letter, because a lot of, like in Japan and America, you don't put your address on your letterhead. It's on the flip side of the envelope. In England, you put your address on the letter. So with English and Canadian and Australian fan mail, we didn't have to keep the envelopes to track the address. All the other stuff we had to, and so they would get sorted by country and then alphabetically, and then taken to poor old Frida Kelly through the tunnel, and then it was her problem.
Frida used to, I love it when you come because you always bring biscuits.
That's right.
I like that folks got their response, and you can call them customers, you can call them whatever, but they're the means to an end.
Absolutely.
I was just reading a section where, after making Abbey Road, somebody had strolled into the studio, a rather rough guy who decided he was there to record playing drums. And actually, no, it was during the White Album when Ringo briefly left the band. And he barged in. He must have gotten by the front desk. And Mal and Ken Mansfield told me this wonderful story. He had seen it happen in person live. Our good friend, the late Ken Mansfield, had seen Mal be sort of confronted by this guy who wanted to play drums on a Beatles record. And Mal, it took him about 30 minutes, but he walked him out of the building and out of the car park, out of the iron gates, onto the street. And he just moved a few steps forward each time, having a good old conversation with him. They smoked a few cigarettes, just had a wonderful time. But the next thing you knew, the guy was out and Mal pulled the gate shut. And one of the other fellows, I think it may have been Kevin Harrington, said, "Now, why didn't you just throw that guy out?" And Mal said, "Because we can't have some bloke saying he was mistreated by the Beatles."
That's right.
Exactly.
Can't have a disgruntled customer.
No.
That's right. And he said, "I will do what I have to do to make sure that he cannot truthfully say that."
Yeah. No, and it wasn't Mal's nature too. He just was.
Oh, he was like a big teddy bear.
He
wasn't
was.
he?
I remember his
tickle
huge.
Ruth
He used
and
to
play
tickle.
games.
He had these huge hands. Well, when you're 4, everybody has huge hands, but he was just, he was a bear of a man. And we were in situations once or twice at the Beatles Christmas concert. I think it was at the Hammersmith Odeon, and it got really hairy. And he literally just scooped me up like the fireman's lift and put me over his shoulder and got me to safety. So yeah, he was all eyes on all the time. He just was very subtle in a large way. I can't describe it any other way.
I really so excited about your book.
I know. I love Mal. He was great. I always felt as a child, if we went to any event or like the Cafe Royal or something, if Mal was there,
it's okay.
It's all going to be okay.
Right. Yeah. That's right.
He was a road manager. He was a brother figure. He was a confidant. He was kind of, the guy that you want on your team. He was awesome.
Sure. And if you're say the greatest band in the history of music, and you can stay up a few more hours and finish some world beating song, it sure helps to have a guy who can
make the tea and toast. Yeah.
Make a food for you. If a guitar breaks or you need new strings, he knows who to wake up.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All of the above. It was sort of like the rock and roll butler, if you will, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
What a good title.
Well, all right.
Your next book.
I'll copyright it after lunch and sell it to you. There you go.
All right, no problem. Can I pay in installments? I notice I can pay in installments for everying now, right?
Yes, right.
You get a plane ticket and it says, "Would you like to pay this in installments?"
Oh, I know.
Well, you know what?
We just did the hotel.
We just went to Palm Springs on some business meetings, and I booked it on Priceline, and they said pay in installments, and I'm like, "What's the catch? How much interest?" There is no interest. It just means the money sits in my bank longer than Priceline's, and I figure they don't need the money in any kind of a hurry. So I gave it a try with this company called Affirm, and it's so far so good. I mean, cash flow, right? Why part with the money up front if they'll let you pay it later and there's zero interest?
The computer that I'm using to speak with both of you on right now, it popped up when I bought this model from Apple, and it said, "Would you like to pay on installments, no interest?" And I thought, I can just give you a few $100s a month and then it will exhaust itself. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's, I think we'll get into that. But the whole financial situation in the world is, I think people are waking up to, with again, back to social media, people like all of us are waking up to the fact that, how much money the banks and credit cards are actually making. They keep raising the interest rate. And I know that's to slow down inflation, but is it really? Is it just so that the rich get richer and they make more money? So,
I have a sneaking feeling, Ruth, that is it.
yeah.
But, of course, what they're banking on, right, is that I like paying over time. And maybe I let it go 1 or 2 payments into that interest-bearing period. And they may, that's great.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Because people don't pay attention to their bills, except I've got Hawkeye on the channel here.
Hawkeye, yeah.
This one.
Okay, we all need one.
So, of all your Beatle books, do you have a favorite, or is that like asking you to name a favorite child?
I don't know that I do. I really am proud of John Lennon. There were so many excellent scholars I was able to work with to bring those stories together. Just a lot of people who had gone out and of course I'd carried out a number of interviews, but I was really proud of the fact that the story worked well with the city. Mm-hmm. It's almost like it's another character, New York. If you both know better than I ever will, he chose to live there. He chose that to be his hometown or his adopted hometown. Yeah. And I felt like it needed to have a richer place in that story. So I really tried to bring it to life. I visited any place he went, I went to, even though most of those places are now either another business or condos or something. I'm very proud of that. This Mal book, I spoke to maybe 300 folks for this one. So it has a lot of different voices that occur inside of it. So I'm proud of that too. But again, I love going to those worlds. And I think what I really liked was visiting a world where John Lennon was still alive.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
I'm a sentimentalist. I won't lie,
Those definitely were the days, man. Mm-hmm. It was sort of like, well, that was the end of an era, the end of the 60s, the end of the 70s, 1980.
And it's still, it still makes no sense. It's still a senseless thing. And,
absolutely.
And very young me, who was only a few years removed from having discovered them via those cartoons, was excited that I was in a world where all of these guys are still making music, right? So
yeah.
There's something special.
Diana's asking an interesting question. Do you think there'll ever be a book on Yoko Ono?
There have been a few, and they take mostly, as I guess they should, a kind of artistic approach to her life, which how do you not do that, right? I think we still haven't received that great Yoko biography that will exist someday. Mm-hmm. I think in my most recent case, she's one of the secret heroes of Mal Evans' story. She really was a fan of his. He was, as he would have been with anybody, right? He was kind to her when a lot of folks weren't at first.
Yeah.
And she, as you will discover, did some wonderful things after Mal was dead, actually, long dead, to help the legacy. And so she has a nice heroic moment. But I do think that there are some very good books about her artistic life.
Right.
But I do think there's room for a big biography someday, because this is an extraordinary person, right?
Oh, yeah. No
doubt. Who is, I look forward to reading it.
Yeah. She's still, to this day, when I was 4 years old, I literally almost died. I had horrible kidney disease and issues, and I had my kidney removed in emergency surgery at Alder Hey Hospital in Liverpool. And Yoko is still a big financial benefactor of that hospital and makes a lot of surgeries and things happen for families that couldn't otherwise do it because they're on this never-ending waiting list of the wonderful but overworked National Health Service. And so, Yoko gets to hear about these emergency cases and just takes care of it.
Yeah, and because of our sort of inner contact with a lot of Liverpool people, she does a great deal of things that never receive any publicity, probably from choice on her part.
Sure. But, a lot of preservation work too.
Good things, but nobody knows.
Yes, right. Preservation work and stuff she does. She I think didn't she buy Mendips and then donate it back to the council?
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. No. So, I mean, obviously, a lot of people were jealous of Linda and of Yoko, all the Beatle wives. That there goes the dream, right? I'm not going to marry my Beatle, but I knew both of these guys pretty well growing up, even through a child's eyes, and I know that neither of them would have picked cruel women. Let's just put it that way. They were interested by the factor of, Linda was a muse for Paul, Yoko was a muse for John. And I think having grown up in black and white, and then all of a sudden their life is in color, these women represented, especially Yoko, this exotic foreign world to John, who went to art school. Wow, she really knows these people in London and hangs out at the Indica Gallery. And it was just intoxicating.
Absolutely. And as you said, inspiring too.
Yeah.
Right.
And I know I see both sides of the coin. I see people at Beatlefest who, disagree with me, and that's fine. That's fine too.
Well,
because we loved Cynthia and Julian, and I know how painful that was. But all marriages go through ups and downs. Some stay together, some don't. And really, at the end of the day, any outcome of any marriage is truly only between two people.
Exactly.
The two spouses.
Exactly.
That's right. And this is where we can learn a lot from Mal, actually, who was very good at loving people and keeping them in his life. He would maintain contact with folks, and I think it was something very special that he was able to do, and to connect with folks in that way. I try to think about that in my own life, right? Not cutting people off just because they're no longer married to so-and-so, or they're no longer friends with so-and-so. Mal really thought a lot about the value of people, maybe to his detriment at times.
Very interesting stuff.
I know you've got something else to do and you have to leave us soon, but could you let us know, or let the folks know, where they can find you online and buy your books and everything? Ruth has it on the crawl, but coming from the horse's mouth would be good.
Well, the horse would be happy to speak up.
Come on, horse.
Yes, it's at KennethWomack.com. Also to be found at EverythingFab4.com. And I have a newsletter so folks can keep up with particularly Mal projects as they happen. And of course, I provide a lot of programming myself. I do a record club every month, a book club, and all sorts of fun, free stuff like that. So I encourage you to sign up for the newsletter. It's the best way to know what's going on. And then I can read it every few weeks, and I find out what's going on. So,
you have a meeting with yourself and accidentally glue yourself to yourself, and then you know where you got to be, right?
That's right. We get together, we talk. It's a little awkward for people who see me talking to myself, but they get the hang of it.
Have you ever fired yourself? I have.
Oh, many times. But I think myself, so far, I've always given myself another chance.
Take yourself back. Yeah.
Take yourself. For our special guests, as you may know if you've seen one or more of these episodes, we have a little limerick to thank you, and we're going to give it a crack. A 1, 2, 3. Our time with Ken Womack
today.
Let's do it again.
All right. Yeah.
A 1, 2, 3. Our time with Ken Womack today just prompts us to heartily say a huge thanks to Ken for the how, where, and when. His books surely brighten our days.
Ta-da!
That's amazing. Thank you.
I don't think we get a Grammy for that, but hey.
I heard very professional harmonies in there.
Yes, you see.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, this has been a joy, and I know you've got a class to run to and a very special guest and book today. So thank you so much, folks. Everybody who joined us today from around the world and who will see this eventually on YouTube, go follow Ken at Kenneth Womack, just like it sounds, .com. For all of the news that's fit to print. Thanks so much for joining us today, Ken. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Angie.
Okay. Bye-bye.
And we'll see you all of a sudden.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to TeaFlix, and check out Dr. Angie's books, Organic Teas and CBD. at mrsmccartneysteas.com. Toodle pip.